Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's explainer is all about something absolutely crucial, becoming a free thinker. We're going to dive deep into how you can actually reclaim your independent thought from all the crazy noise of the modern world. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so Bertrand Russell once dropped this brutally honest line: most people would sooner die than think. In fact, they do so. Heavy, right? But think about it. Next time you're in a crowded train station or a busy coffee shop tomorrow morning, just look around. People are rushing, sure, they look functional, but how many of them actually look awake? The harsh reality is that most of us are just completely on autopilot, marching to a rhythm we didn't even pick.
So, that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. Are you truly awake? Or, honestly, are you just reading off a script handed to you by your parents, your boss, or maybe just the loudest influencer on your feed? It's kind of a quiet tragedy, really. Think of how many folks wake up at, say, 70 years old, only to suddenly realize they spent their entire lives managing everyone else's expectations. They never actually stop to ask, wait, what do I actually want?
All right, section 1, the awakening moment, and the free thinker.
So how do we actually break out of this autopilot loop? Well, becoming a free thinker, hitting that awakening, it isn't some crazy cinematic explosion with fireworks. As the source material beautifully puts it, it's way quieter than that. It's just that simple yet profound moment where you finally stop running from your own truth. It's when you step up, take total ownership of your life, and actually listen to your own voice for the first time in maybe years.
To really get this, let's look at a real-life guide's journey. Now, following some pretty intense early childhood trauma, the author whose work we're looking at today actually spiraled into severe addiction. We're talking a heavy reliance on prescription pills throughout his 20s. But he pulled off this incredible self-correction using what he calls monk mode. Basically a hardcore reset, intense discipline, finding solitude, and rebuilding his body and mind literally from the ground up, which eventually led to a massive spiritual awakening.
And that brings us to the author himself, James Ralevsky. He's our guide to self-mastery for this explainer. His raw, unfiltered experience, getting to a point of total spiritual awakening while standing barefoot in the freezing rain, finally forgiving his past, it absolutely proves that no matter how deep that autopilot programming goes, you can start over. Fundamentally changing how you think is 100% possible. He didn't just read this in some textbook. The guy literally learned it by surviving his own life.
So Ralevsky distilled everything he learned into these 7 principles of free thinking. As you'll see, it moves step by step, starting from claiming your beliefs all the way to pursuing the unconventional path. But for today, we are going to laser focus. We're diving deep into the highly practical, day-to-day mechanics of Principle 1, claiming your beliefs.
Moving into Section 2, Traits of Great Thinkers.
Now, before we can claim our own beliefs, we kind of need to know what great thinking actually looks like, right? What's fascinating is that history's most memorable figures, they all bent the rules, but they did it completely differently. Take Rosa Parks, fiercely independent, straight up refused to conform to unjust norms. Then you've got Steve Jobs, who was incredibly intuitive, always trusting his gut over conventional data to build things like the iPhone. Socrates, he was all about critical, systematic questioning, and Aristotle leaned heavily on pure logical observation. So, the big takeaway here, there is absolutely no single right way to think. You don't have to be a famous historical icon to use these methods, you just have to find the style that clicks with your own unique strengths.
All right, Section 3, claiming your true beliefs.
Once you find your style, you can really start claiming your true beliefs. But, and it's a big but, that means learning to navigate the absolute Wild West chaos of modern social media and comment sections. Ask yourself honestly, how often have you almost fallen for one of those super confident, flashy finance gurus online? You know the exact type I'm talking about. The guy promising he can turn your $5,000 into $50,000 in 6 months, all while leaning against a rented Lamborghini, right? That's the pretender. They rely entirely on vague promises, pulling on your emotions, and shouting social proof like everyone else is doing it. An expert, on the other hand, is completely grounded. They have verifiable credentials, they cite real sources, and get this, they actually welcome your scrutiny instead of getting defensive when you ask questions.
So here's a quick toolkit for you. Whenever you hear advice that feels just a little too good to be true, hit the brakes and ask 3 crucial questions. 1. Who actually is this person? 2. What is their hard evidence? And 3, this is the big one, what do they gain if I believe them? Taking that tiny split second to run through these questions, that is where real independent thinking actually begins.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Mastering Your Impulses.
Because look, filtering out the external noise is really only half the battle. The hard truth is even the most amazing critical thinking will instantly die in that tiny gap between a strong emotion and a sudden impulsive action. We call this biological reality an amygdala hijack. Picture this. You get a harsh, overly critical email from your boss. Boom. Instantly, cortisol floods your entire system. Your brain's alarm system trips the fight or flight switch, and biologically, it actually suppresses your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, rational part of your brain. When you're in this state, you are hardwired for aggressive, instant action, not careful analysis. You literally, biologically cannot think clearly.
So how on earth do we hack our own biology? Well, you use the 10-second pause. First, you label the feeling. But, and this is a massive distinction, don't say I am angry, say I feel angry. That tiny little shift in wording, it completely detaches your identity from the emotion. It's huge. Second, just pause for 10 seconds. That's it. Give your nervous system a moment to settle down and bring that logical prefrontal cortex back online. And finally, ask yourself, is my reaction actually going to help? Doing this is literally practicing critical thinking in real time.
And over time, you got to build up what the author calls mental calluses. Think of long-term self-control as a muscle. You build it up through micro-decisions every single day, like choosing to ignore your phone for an hour or, drinking water when you're bored instead of grabbing a soda. And journaling? Journaling is an absolute superpower here. It lets you take all that internal daily chaos, externalize it, shrink it down onto a piece of paper, and look at it logically. Every single time you do this, you're literally wiring new neural pathways that make resisting the next impulse just a little bit easier.
Which brings us to Section 5, writing your own rules.
Once you start mastering those impulses, you arrive at the final, ultimate step. You have to realize that most people out there are living by rules they never even consciously selected. To be a true free thinker, you've got to challenge the script you inherited from your parents, your teachers, or your culture. Do an audit of your life. What do you actually consider right or wrong? What truly sits well with your specific personality? Look, this isn't about just rebelling for the sake of being a rebel. Not at all. It's about giving yourself the permission to keep the good values that actually protect you and completely tossing out the philosophies that force you to pretend to be someone you just aren't.
And all of this really builds up to one undeniable truth. An opinion that feels right is not the same as information that is true. Honestly, finding truth in a world this noisy, it requires sitting with discomfort. It requires rigorous self-control. And most importantly, it takes the sheer courage to actively verify claims, rather than just blindly accepting whatever makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside.
So I want to leave you with this really provocative final thought. If you completely ignored money, ignored approval, ignored tradition, what would you actually build with the next 5 years of your life? I'm challenging you right now. Stop managing other people's expectations. Write your answer down today and take that very first step toward building your own authentic life. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep thinking free.